Sarjahani. He is a registered dietitian whose connection with food safety has been from all angles, following guidelines as a grass-based and organic farming intern, acting as an ambassador of food safety as a sustainability coordinator for Virginia Tech Dining Services, and politically as a close follower of the recent food safety legislation in Congress. He'll tell you some more about himself a little later, but for now, let me turn it over to Andy to give an introduction to the meat of today's webinar. Thank you for coming.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Thank you, guys. So we are here to talk about food safety, and as you all know, that one of the motivations for this webinar is a lot of food safety legislation has been being passed around in Congress. At the time, HR 2749 is one of the is probably what you've been hearing about. At the moment, it is farmers markets themselves are not regulated by HR 2749. And it's also important to know that it's not law at the moment. It is in the Senate, and they will reconvene on September the 7th. So it is important to, if you'd like to know more about that, it's important to keep track and contact your senators. And we can talk more about HR 2749 if you all have more questions on that, but it's important to know that farmers markets themselves are not regulated at the moment by that piece of legislation. So first, we're going to talk about kind of the flow of today's presentation. Kind of the way it's going to go is we're going to start out with Betsy Bihn, who I'll introduce in a moment. Betsy's going to talk about gaps at the farmers market, good agricultural practices, and then we're going to move on to Brigitte, and she's going to, and I'll also introduce Brigitte when it's time for her presentation. And Brigitte's going to talk about safety considerations in sampling and chef demos and so on and so forth. And then we're going to have a Q&A session. Or if we have time, if you all have a brief presentation on tip sheets for working with market growers on food safety that we can go into if we have enough time. So right now I'm going to go ahead and introduce Betsy and turn it over to her in a second. Betsy is a senior extension associate in the Department of Food Science at Cornell University. She did her BS in zoology from The Ohio State University and her MS in horticulture from the University of Florida. She has been the program coordinator for the National Good Agricultural Practices. We'll refer to that probably as GAPS during this presentation, since 1999. And Betsy is currently working towards her PhD in food microbiology at Cornell University on a part-time basis. And I'll go ahead and turn it over to Betsy now.
Good afternoon, everybody, or for anybody on the East Coast, West Coast. This morning, I'm very happy to be here to talk to you about good agricultural practices. Andy mentioned I'm from the National Good Agricultural Practices Program, which is a national education and extension program designed to reduce microbial risk to fresh fruits and vegetables during production. I encourage you at any time, if you have questions, to put me some questions, and I will try to answer them as best I can. Today's topic is going to be covered in 3 different parts. I'm going to go over about 4 outbreak and illness data slides. Then I'm going to talk about good agricultural practices in general, but then try and focus that with an emphasis on farmers markets and how it impacts farmers markets. And then we're going to talk a little bit about food safety implementation and educational materials that are available for you as farm marketers to work with the growers that are part of your market. This first slide shows you FDA-regulated foods linked to reported outbreaks from 1996 to 2006, and it's based on some data that is from the FDA. You will notice here that yellow represents produce. I think I've got a pointer here. 15.6% of the outbreaks of FDA-regulated foods, I want to stress that, it's not foods regulated by USDA, but FDA-only regulated foods. 15.6% of the outbreaks resulted from produce. The rest of these would be seafood, dairy, eggs. If you include sprouts, which is clearly a fruit, vegetable kind of commodity, that adds an additional 6%, so you're looking at 21 point. I think they break sprouts out because sprouts have had so many problems, and they want to know more specifically what's going on with. If you move to this next slide, we're looking at illnesses here. And the definition of an outbreak, so the first slide was outbreaks. This slide is illnesses. The definition of an outbreak is 2 or more illnesses. So you can see here when you start to look at the illnesses, the produce-related illnesses jumps quite dramatically. So we've got 37.3% of the illnesses are caused by produce. And again, if you add this 7% related to sprouts, you can see it's a fairly significant number. What that would be 44.3%. So it is significant, illnesses and outbreaks. And this is why the FDA has started focusing its attention on developing practices to reduce risks. Now, when you look at the types of produce associated with outbreaks, this is a very important slide, and I do apologize because this key over here is quite small, so hopefully you can see it. But I'm going to go through and read them for you in case you have it too small on your screen. The pink is berries, so 8.5 would be berries. 4.2 would be green onions. Herbs would be 8.5. Leafy greens would be 32.4. Melons would be 15.5. Tomatoes would be 16.9. Others would be 9.8. And then the important part or theme to get from this slide is that we're not talking about just one commodity. We're talking about a significant number of commodities. So leafy greens, berries, green onions, melons, lots of different things that are grown on farms, particularly farms that do multiple crops, the exact kind of farmers that tend to show up at farmers markets. They sell multiple different commodities, and they're all very much impacted by produce safety. I added this slide essentially for one reason and one reason only. This slide highlights outbreak data from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. You can see that the light colored is the 70s, and you can see that the trends within a pathogen group, bacterial, viral, parasites, and chemicals, you can see that there's an increase in these over time. The one that remains sort of stable is this chemical, and the reason I put this slide in here is that when you ask consumers what are their biggest concerns related to produce, many times you'll get this response of chemical concerns. Highlight that in terms of data, it bears out that they should be more concerned about microbiological issues than necessarily about chemical issues. The relevance to the farmer's market is that you want to protect the health and the safety of your customers and your consumers. That's paramount. Protecting the financial interest of your market, that's also a very significant concern, because if you think about, just depending on the size of your market and the people that come through there, it really could be devastating to a market if a foodborne illness originated at the market. The other thing is protecting the unique relationship with the public. And I really want to stress that, because farmers markets tend to have this very unique relationship with the public. You're directly selling to them. There's a lot of trust there. And they're not just going there to buy food. They're going there because they're supporting local businesses. They're paying many times premium prices for this product. They're expecting a premium product. And it's critical, your relationship, unlike retail markets, I think you have a very different relationship with the consumers that shop at farmers markets. So food safety, protecting those consumers is very, very important. Foodborne illnesses associated with fresh produce definitely impact marketability and profitability. They certainly impact regulatory agencies and regulations that come about. The example I like to use here is the cider rules. In 1996, there was an outbreak in unpasteurized apple cider. Now we have regulations nationwide and in states that specify that cider must be pasteurized or must go through some log reduction, such as a UV pasteurization or a high temp, low time pasteurization, to reduce the risks that were associated with it, because there were continual outbreaks in cider. So the government stepped in and introduced regulation. It certainly impacts consumer confidence and impacts their buying preferences, and they're not easily forgotten. Now, the thing I want to say about impact is this impact most likely is negative. When you look at, there was an outbreak in 1996. We had an extension call come in. A lady asked, it was believed to be in strawberries. It wasn't in strawberries, but it was believed to be coming from strawberries. We had a lady call an extension person and ask if it was safe to eat the strawberries in her backyard. Now, this may sound humorous, but the point is that there was an outbreak, what they believed to be in strawberries, on the West Coast, and we had somebody on the East Coast concerned to eat the strawberries in her backyard. So it impacts what consumers are willing to buy, what they know. Their knowledge is not always very deep related to outbreaks, so if they hear that strawberries are dangerous, they don't want to eat strawberries. It doesn't matter where they come from. And that would be the negative side. On the flip side, when we had the spinach outbreak in 2006, I had a grower who grows for farm markets tell me if he had known there was a spinach outbreak, he would have only planted spinach because people didn't trust the stuff they were getting in the bags, but they were buying the local stuff as fast as he could produce it. So it does impact, and sometimes these impacts are hard to gauge, but I would say on a whole they tend to be more negative than such as positive. What can we do to minimize risk? The focus is truly on risk reduction, not risk elimination. And this is a quote taken directly from the Guide to Minimize Microbial Food Safety Hazards for Fresh Fruits and Vegetables produced by the FDA in 1998. Current technologies cannot eliminate all potential food safety hazards associated with fresh produce that will be eaten raw. The reason for this is that fresh produce is produced outside, in fields, under open skies, and much of it is eaten raw. So there's no kill step, there's no step to mitigate risks that may be there. And the key here is preventing the contamination is the key to reducing microbial risk. And we know from research or from studies that indicate once contamination occurs, particularly on fresh fruits and vegetables that have a very varied and diverse texture, it's tough to remove the contamination once it gets established. So truly the key is preventing contamination. So now we've come to the good agricultural practices part of this discussion. And good agricultural practices, we've given a very broad definition that it's any operational procedure or activity that reduces microbial risk to fruits and vegetables on the farm or in the packing house. From a farm market perspective, this is very important because these fields are what supplies your farmer's market. So we like to say in the National Good Agricultural Practices Program, food safety begins on the farm because it begins during growing, so any contamination that happens there can easily continue through the food chain. It can also be introduced at any additional steps, which Brigitte is going to address when she talks about sample preparation. But the important thing is that food safety at the farm level does impact your farm market because that's the product you are selling. This is a list of things that I talk to growers about when we talk about production challenges. We talk about worker training. Many fresh fruits and vegetables are harvested by hand. Worker hygiene, worker hand washing is really critical to food safety, and I'm going to talk more about that from a farmer's market perspective. We talk about water. Where's your water coming from? Are you testing your water? How are you applying that water? Is it overhead irrigation? Is it drip irrigation? Are you sourcing from a well, from a municipal source, from a surface water source such as a pond or a stream? When are you applying manure? Where does the manure come from? Do you know the source of the manure, or are you just picking the manure up from a grower or from a dairy farmer that you don't know so well, so you don't know how the manure is being segregated? Sanitation. Are you washing your harvest bins? Are you keeping your toilet facilities clean so that your workers want to use them? We talk about wildlife, everything from deer, birds, access to the fields versus access to packing sheds. In farm production, we have everything from packing houses that have doors and windows and screens to what I like to refer to as 4 sticks and a lid. So a very different packing facility, so we have to talk about wildlife and access to these facilities. We also talk about traceability. And this is important for you as farm marketers to understand as well. Traceability is the ability to trace something through the food chain. Now, is a grower responsible for tracing it through all those steps? What we try to focus on is 1 step forward and 1 step back. where did the product come from and where did it go? And in the case of a farmer's market, the growers are growing it and harvesting it and then selling it directly to the consumers. So it isn't very deep or very long, that traceability system, but it's important to know what fields were harvested when, who did the harvesting, and what day they were sold at the market. Farm security has become more important. Certainly since 9/11, the government has placed more priority on it. But there's also other issues related to farm security. I had a grower in the Midwest who had an off-farm job and an on-farm job and had some barns that were located in fields away from the house. And they weren't in the barns for a while, and they actually had people set up crystal meth operations while they were not on farm. And I bring it up because you need to know some of the struggles that some of the growers have to deal with depending on their location. And certainly crisis management. Being able to have a crisis management plan so that if there is some sort of outbreak, or if there is an illness on the farm, or if a farmer gets into an accident, knowing what the process on the farm is. Who do we contact? Who are the buyers of these products? Who's the market manager that I need to contact if we're not able to make it to market? And having these crisis management plans in place. I'm not going to go into any more depth in that, but if I did a training with growers, we would certainly talk about these things in detail. When we talk about fresh produce, there are certain food safety challenges that exist. First of all, there's low levels of sporadic contamination on a variety of crops. I talked a little bit about this earlier. Berries, leafy greens, tomatoes, melons. There's a lot of different commodities being affected. In some cases, the infective dose of some of these organisms is as low as 10 cells. So you're not talking about a massive contamination event to cause illness. You're talking about very low levels of contamination that can result in illness. They're often eaten uncooked. I really wanted to highlight, this is a farmer's market reality. Every farmer's market I've ever been to, people buy the crop and then walk away and eat it. So it's not being rinsed with cool water. It's just being consumed right there uncooked. Fresh produce-associated pathogens, again, have this low infective dose, so it doesn't take a huge contamination event to cause illness. And as I mentioned before, it's difficult to remove pathogens once they adhere to the surface. So really, prevention is the key to success. Here's some farmers market challenges that I drew up, and later on we're going to ask you if you know of any other challenges or risks or concerns. We would love for you to share these in the chat area to get people thinking along those lines. But how well do you know all of your vendors? How well do you know their farming operations? How well do you know the practices that they have in place? Another big one for farm markets that I've been to is hand washing and toilet facilities for both the vendors and the public. Do people have a place to wash their hands? Because if you're preparing food, if you're selling food, anytime you're handling raw fruits and vegetables, you really should have clean hands. And having access to hand washing facilities is critical. Serving samples. I'm not going to go into this too much because I know Brigitte's going to talk about the preparation of samples, but we do talk about in some of our, Jeff had mentioned that I have a pod with some of the references I put up there, but we do want to talk about if you offer samples, making sure you have a way that they can pick individual samples up so they're not touching all the samples, keeping them cool, and throwing them away after a few hours if they haven't been refrigerated so that there's no chance for cold chain maintenance. If you have products that require being in a cooler, how do you manage that at the farm market? Do you bring coolers with you? Do you do top ice? If you do top ice, where's that ice coming from? Making sure it's made from a high-quality water source. Sanitation, making sure that if you offer samples, it's clean. Also, having clean bins, clean harvest bins. Especially if it's been muddy or wet or rainy, the harvest bins will get muddy, and you really have to keep on top of the sanitation and making sure that cleanliness is reducing those risks that may exist from mud or from soils. As you can see in this picture, this is another thing that came up. He has some of his harvest bins, leafy greens, right there in the picture. I think I can highlight this. He has a bin sitting on the ground right there, and making sure your product is up off the ground. See, there's a table back here, making sure you display your stuff so that you're not adding any contamination risks. And certainly pests and pets. People, oftentimes growers, I've seen bring their dogs to market. There's one market where there's a live chicken that is part of a produce display, I guess, for lack of a better word. Having live animals that are prone to defecating near the produce definitely increases risks, and I certainly would not recommend it. You also have to worry about, depending on where your market is, you might have pest problems such as roosting birds or rodents or flies or stuff like that. So these are all concerns. I also want to talk a little bit about farmers markets patrons because you're dealing directly with the public. I love the early morning farm market customer who gets up early to get to the farmer's market, to get the best product, to get the freshest product, and they gather up all their products, and then they go back to their cars, and then what do? And we know that some of our patrons will get there early, and then they just want to run a few errands. And we know in the summer how hot vehicles can get. So patrons will leave their product. Maybe they put it in their trunk to keep it cool, but the trunk really isn't that cool. So one of the things that farm markets can do is encourage patrons to bring coolers. Bring coolers with ice packs to put the stuff in if they're going to run these errands after they come to your farm market. Or encourage them to go directly home and put it in the refrigerator and handle the produce properly for quality and safety. I mean, that's critical to quality and safety. Love me, love my pet. Some people love their pets and they want to take their pets to the market. Their pets are like their face as well as the other people attending the market. And there is some sense with many people who shop at farm markets that any product sold at a farmer market is completely safe and free of anything that might be bad. And fresh fruits and vegetables sold at farmers markets are like any other fresh fruits and vegetables. There's always a possibility for risk because they are grown outside under open skies. So we really need to focus on talking about and reducing the risks that are out there so that the consumers and the farm market attendees can maintain that trust relationship and maintain that feeling that going to a farmer's market is a completely good experience that allows them to support local agriculture. Farmers market food safety policy. This is where we get into a lot of the questions that I wanted to put forth out there. And really the reason I'm posing these is I want you to start thinking about what's happening at your farmer's market and what can you do to increase the safety at your market. Does your market have food safety expectations? Are these expectations shared with the vendors? Do the vendors know what you expect of them? Do the growers who are part of your market follow GAPs or other food safety? Do you have a food safety plan? What kind of food safety practices do you practice at the farm level? What are the steps you're taking to reduce risks, both microbial, physical, chemical, any of those things? What are your biggest concerns as a farm market manager or as somebody who runs farm markets or attends farm markets? What are the things that you see at your market that concern you from a food safety perspective? How do you manage these risks related to the public and your patrons? I know direct marketers such as you-pick growers often have trouble with patrons. For instance, some you-pick operations only let you bring in your own containers, whereas some people want to bring in their own containers. The issue of animals oftentimes comes up. So how do you manage the public? Because they're the people you're trying to attract. They're the people you're dependent on for supporting your market. But there's also risks related to that you have to deal with. And, it's important to establish what your rules are so that the public feels that they're fairly implemented across the board, so that they're not being singled out like, only I can't bring my dog, but the grower can bring his dog. Why is that fair? So stuff like that, and having a consistent message across the entire started. Understand the food safety risks that are relevant to your farmer's market because each market is different from size, from location, from facilities that are available. Understand your market's dependent on independent business people and get everyone involved. I like to talk about adult learners. When we're young, we can be told, do it because I said so. But as soon as you're working with adult learners, which these independent business people are, you have to explain why you're interested in food safety. Why are we talking about produce food safety? We're talking about it because we've seen an increase in illnesses related to the consumption of fresh fruits and vegetables. We want to protect our market. We want to protect our buyers. Let's implement practices that allow us to talk about food safety and allow us to reduce risks and improve our market. and develop a plan. Some goals are immediately achievable because, for instance, if you don't have access to toilets or hand washing facilities, you can rent them. You can rent some really nice hand washing stands, really nice portable toilets. Some things like that are easy fixes. Others may take some time. If your growers really don't have food safety plans, really haven't thought about produce food safety, making a rule that they have to have a plan by the end of the season might be a little too much in 1 year. So introducing the topic, providing educational sessions to get everybody on board, allowing growers to be part of that process and to come up with the best plan. So I think it's important to develop a plan and know that your goals may take time. Some may come easy, some may take a little more effort. I'm getting to the end of my presentation right now, and what I wanted to highlight here is our website. This is the National GATS educational website. I don't want to scare you off. If you're on dial-up, you'll come to a front page that allows you to get all this information without all the pretty graphics. So if you happen to be in a rural area, you can still use this website and you won't have to deal with downloading all the graphics. Again, right here. This link right here will take you to the National GATS educational materials, which I'm going to show you a few of, or show you the covers of a few. You can download many of them. You can also order them in here. The events calendar will highlight upcoming trainings. This training was highlighted here. And you can get to collaborators in, I think, 27 different states by going to this link. Okay. And there's other things like web links for audit, third-party audits if you're interested. And you can find us here, Bob Gravani and myself, who run the program. And there used to be a database. This is currently down because we had it hacked into, but we're working on getting that back up. Here are a few of the educational materials we've created. Our Grower's Guide, a GAMPS pamphlet, a farm assessment. I did have a link in my go-to box that Jeff highlighted. A resource manual. We do have a secondary education curriculum that has a lot of hands-on demonstrations for high school students, if any of you are involved in doing community outreach. We do have an online GAPS course. If you're interested in more of this information, you can take the online course and get more in depth about GAPS. And again, there's the website address. I really do appreciate your time this afternoon, and I'd be happy to field any questions if there are any. Otherwise, we'll let Andy get on and introduce Brigitte.
All righty. I think maybe we can have some time for Q&A at the end. It was my understanding we can just go ahead and keep it flowing, and we'll move on to Brigitte here. Brigitte Moran is the Executive Director of the Marin Farmers Market. It's a nonprofit operating 9 farmers markets in the Northern California region. She's been in the farmers market industry for 22 years and is currently involved with the Marin Convention and Visitors Bureau, as well as numerous other organizations involved with food and food production. She also served as a director on the board of the Farmers Market Coalition, the Marin Center for Volunteerism, the Marin Visitors Bureau, and the San Rafael Chamber of Commerce. And she's going to talk to you today about sampling and chef demos and addressing food safety considerations when dealing with those types of situations. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Brigitte now.
Hi, everybody. Betsy was a smart one, and I'm the practical one. So food safety at the markets. I've got my little, is it up, Andrew? Andy, is it up?
Yes, your
okay, thanks.
Your slides are up.
All right, thank you. So that's me. So you have a picture of who I am. And you can go onto our website at themarinfarmersmarket.org and get all of this literature and all the photos that come with it to use for your own farmers for sampling guidelines. So know the hands that feed you. As Betsy said, we have a lot of trust from our consumers. They do believe that what they're getting is completely safe, because they know the person that grew the food. And we farmers who are selling products that are directly grown from the ground, and then they're doing samplings. We have prepackaged foods, like oils or pastas or jams. And then we also have temporary food facilities that actually serve food that's prepared on site. Along with that, we do chef demos as an association to educate the public on how to use some of the products that are at the market. So these are some of our beautiful products that we all have at all our markets. And this, I think we've all seen. We've all seen that farmer grab their knife, cut into their peach, and hand a piece to a consumer, and that is not okay. It's just can lead to all sorts of foodborne illnesses. So this is what a sampling prep looks like at our markets. Now, we work very closely with our health department in the counties that we're in. We find them to be our partners. So we don't see them as the inspectors to our offices to meet with our market managers and discuss how to help all the farmers and food purveyors be as safe as possible. And it was with them that we developed these pictures and the guidelines. So you can see the soap for hand washing and paper towels. It requires a 4 to 7 gallon potable water free-flowing dispenser valve. Is the blue one in the middle. So what you do is you would wash your hands, wash the product, put it into the second container. Then you've got this rinse, the blue one in the middle, on the third one there. Markets have water that are accessible, and that's great. But the problem is that you cannot get rid of the water unless you have a sewer system to do that in. So we require all of our farmers and food purveyors to bring the water back with them and get rid of it in a sewer system, or a porta potty if you can handle that. The last one is the sanitizing basin, and that is a combination of a teaspoon of chlorine to a gallon of water. So cleaning is a process that removes dirt, grease, and food debris. That's using soap. Sanitizing is a process that kills disease-causing bacteria with bleach. That's not soap or detergent. So sanitizing is with bleach, cleaning is with soap. Some of the other tools that you need for sampling is you need a plastic cutting board, a non-porous plastic cutting board, or a wooden cutting board, or even a paper plate, a disposable paper plate, a knife, tongs, latex gloves, toothpicks, and then covered containers, clear covered containers of some kind. And there's all different kinds that are made. And then a garbage with plastic garbage bag in it. So the number one choice for farmers is to actually have enough staff to be able to do it themselves, give the sample to the consumer, because then you can educate the consumer on the product, what type of apple it is, where you grew it. You can have that conversation. They can taste it and then also learn the story about the product. So that's the best way to do it. The second choice is to actually leave it on your table with a variety. Let's say if you have 5 different varieties of apples, you would leave your varieties with little signs explaining what they are, and then the consumer would lift the lid, and they always have to have lids, and then a toothpick, and pick out their own. That's if you don't have enough staff to do it. Prepackaged in a commercial kitchen. So these are some of the examples of some of the prepackaged things that we have in our markets. Olive oils, jams, breads. They have to be kept in paper bags. Sorbets, the cheese is in the middle there. Cupcakes, pastas. Some of these things, all of these things have to be done in commercial kitchens. So you can't have a farmer who's decided to make their jams in their own home kitchen. They have to actually use a commercial kitchen and get a health permit that's different than the one that they would have if they were at just a farmer's market. Sneeze guards and samplings. So up in the left-hand corner, that's Suki's naan bread. I don't know if you can see it, but the samples in the back there, those have a sneeze guard in front of them. And the way the vendor samples that is the person themselves actually puts a sample with gloves on the bread and gives it to the consumer. And that works really well. By the way, you cannot touch money, or farmers or vendors cannot touch money and sampling at the same time. So they need to take their gloves off and then do the money and then put the gloves back on. The preserves to the right, those are self-serve. So there's a plastic container over the top, and then folks can just take a toothpick and pick in there. Nuts, the best way that our health department says is to sample nuts is through these shakeable containers. So they do that with, there's just an opening at the top and people can just shake them out. Bakery, cookies have to have sneeze guards in front of them. The Vendors wear a glove and hand them with a wax piece of paper. And you can see everything is covered. So we can't have bakers that just leave their open-air breads like you see in Europe. That's not allowed. Temporary food facilities. They're called TFFs in California. And those are facilities where you can actually, it's like building a restaurant on site. And it has to be a completely enclosed tent. Alain, who's our little Frenchie who makes crepes there in the corner, you can see some of the things that he has to go to, and I'm not going to go deep into this, but the 2 containers in front of the crepe makers, those are filled with eggs and milk, and it's the batter. They have to be kept at a certain temperature, and the health department comes in and actually tests the temperature. So as far as enforcement goes, what we've done is we try and be the first line of defense for the health department. If we see things that are improper, then we ask the vendors to please do the right thing. If they choose not to, we bring in the health department. They are fined. The first time it's a $100 fine. The second is a $300 fine. And then we have internal rules that if they don't follow those rules, they're jeopardizing the entire market, so they can lose their space. The one in the right-hand corner is something I've never seen here in America, but it is a trailer, and it's in Europe, and I would love to see one here. It is in every market in Europe, and what they do is they're refrigerated, they have lights, and they just open up the sides, and then you've got, this is chicken, but they do cheeses, they do chickens, they do all sorts of things. So it would be like having your own rolling butcher shop or cheese shop or dairy shop. Chef demonstrations. We found chef demonstrations to be a huge educational piece that we can use at the market. So we developed this tent structure and mirror. It cost us about $4,500. We had this mirror designed custom. We got a picture of one of our farmers and did a banner across the back so that it gave you the impression that you were at the farm. We partner a farmer with a local chef that sources locally. We built a stovetop. And what happens is the chef makes the product at their kitchen in the restaurant for the consumers to taste. They don't actually make the product at the market. This chef is making stuffed squash, I believe. But you get this great banter between the farmer and the chef, and a great way for people to taste something new. But the health regulations are similar to the temporary food facilities if you're going to cook something that you're going to serve the consumer on site. And then all the temperatures have to be regulated and remain the same. Excuse me. Finally, dogs. Dogs are a big issue. In the state of California, no animal is allowed within 20 feet of any food. So we do have farmers who think that they should bring their dogs in their trucks. Some of them are obstinate, so they park their trucks down the way. But there's no dogs allowed by the health department, and it is a county or a state ordinance. So the only ones who can enforce it are sheriffs in our county. So what we found is just being polite, asking people, to please move your dog somewhere else. We do use the words health department, that it's just not our made-up rule that we don't like dogs because we do like them. So that is it. That's the simple. Keep your markets clean, keep your hands clean, know who feeds your, I just screwed up what I just said. Know the hands that feed you and keep them clean. So I hope that helps, and thank you for listening.
All righty, thank you, Brigitte. Right now we're going to go ahead and open it up for Q&A, and the way that's going to work is you'll go ahead and type in your questions in your chat box, and they will pop up at the bottom at the Q&A section, and we'll just pass it on to the appropriate party by reading it aloud, and then we'll allow them to answer that question. So if you guys have questions, we'll go ahead and start with that.
Well, any questions? Just type right there in that chat box. It should be just under the safety first slide there.
120-day pre-harvest interval.
Nate is asking if there's any scientific evidence to back it up.
Okay. First of all, the 120 pre-harvest interval, there's lots of places that use the 120-day pre-harvest interval. I know National Organic Program uses that for products that are either touching the soil or in contact with the soil. The National GAPS Program, that's one of the ones that we use as well. There is a lot of data out there that would suggest that perhaps this might be too conservative. I know there are some buyers out there that stipulate that they will not buy product that has had raw manure applied in the last 3 years. So when I work with growers, we talk about 120 days, and I use 120 days as the minimum. There was one article that suggested that some organisms, specifically things like parasites, can persist a lot longer than 120 days in the environment. There's also, I believe it was E. coli 0157H7. They had persisting outside of that 120 days. I'm looking at it right now, and I'll try and find that here. But the issue is that there is some science. 120 days is, as I said, a very conservative number. It used to be a very liberal number, but it's getting more conservative with the more we look at organisms in the soil, particularly, like I mentioned, as parasites. And in a follow-up, if it doesn't, I will look for that reference related to this.
Okay, we'll go ahead.
To Beth, this is Brigitte. How is the stovetop used? Well, since we can't enclose the entire tent as a temporary food facility would normally, we are simply teaching people how to cook on the stovetop. So we're teaching them the recipe on the stovetop. The farmer's talking with the chef, but the actual food that's being served was made in a commercial kitchen.
If that doesn't answer the question, just follow up. I have a question here for Betsy, and that's from Leah, and that is, Betsy, are there published GAP guidelines for distributors of local foods?
Okay, currently GAPs are voluntary compliance. So when you talk about, when you talk about guidelines, you could look at the FDA guide to reduce microbial risk to fresh fruits and vegetables. You could look at our book, Food Safety Begins on the Farm, a Grower's Guide. When you talk about distributors, there was a group out of, I'm in my office now looking for it, who did create another guide that they created as a guidance document that I think was meant more for, you have to excuse me, I'm now digging around in my office looking for it. If you're talking about distributors being mostly farm market people, we have a part of our assessment guide that is specifically dealing with direct marketers. And that's one thing that would be useful to you. That's not great. I wish I could put my hands on, again, give me a second. Now I'm looking for two references. And if you want to hit another question there.
We got a couple of questions here, kind of along the same lines. Folks are wondering how many markets do we know of markets that actually require their farmers to attend a GAP training session before they are admitted to their market? If anyone's aware of those? I'm not aware of those.
I am not aware of markets that are requiring training before they become or join the market, but I am aware of at least one market that is, well, I know there's many markets that have offered trainings because they buy our materials and I've talked to them. There's one market currently that I'm working with that is developing, the growers at their market are working together to put together their farm market guidelines. So they're working on developing farm market guidelines for their specific market. And they're looking at possibly over a period of time making it a requirement for all of their growers so that they will have that kind of a situation.
Okay. Bridget, are you aware of anything like that in Northern California?
No, I'm not.
Okay, and I'm not either, I'm now in Montana, but either in Southwest Virginia or the Shenandoah Valley or in Montana, I'm not aware of those. Now we have another question. It says, site visits are conducted for all of our vendors during the application process, but how can food safety on the farm be enforced by the market managers? Suggestions? And that's actually, I'll let Betsy and Brigitte, if they want to hop in on that one, they're more than welcome to. And then if we want, I can hop into the presentation on tips for working with growers that we've prepared.
Yeah, what I would say is if you're doing a site visit, first of all, you can ask to see a grower's food safety plan. So one of the things you can do is look at the plan. We tell growers, if you didn't write it down, it didn't happen. So one of the things we talk about with food safety plans is the appropriate record keeping to back up that you've done what you say you've done. So as a farm marketer, if you're making a visit and you want to check up on it, you could look at that farm food safety plan and look at that record keeping. When you talk about providing clean facilities, there should be records when the facilities were clean. They should have an illness reporting system for workers. You can ask to see these record-keeping sheets as one way to help you verify that they're keeping up on a daily basis. A saying I love is, it's food safety every day. Okay, and that's one way to look at food safety happening every day, is to look at that record keeping.
From our perspective, we're not sophisticated enough yet to enforce anything on the farm. We have a tough enough time doing it at the market. So any suggestions I would love to hear.
Okay, thanks, Brigitte and Betsy. If it's okay with everyone, we can go ahead and I'll hop into this presentation based on my experiences at Virginia Tech as a sustainability coordinator for dining services, and on working with growers, market growers on food safety, and just some tips that real practical things that I picked up along the way. I'll go through that, and then we will hopefully have some time for more questions, and then we'll finish up. So go ahead and get started. And so I don't know that I need to introduce myself because I think Jeff's already taken care of that. But I think the first thing that is so important is to develop relationships. It's essential to a successful partnership. You got to have mutual respect, and I think one of the things I remember when I first started working with growers is I was sort of like the big bad food safety guy, and that wasn't so at all. It was once you can, you have to establish that this is a partnership and a collaboration, and once you can show that that's what you're there for, then things become much effective. Just real quick, if everyone can mute yourself, that's star and pound key. If you haven't already done so, we'd be greatly appreciative. Moving on here. And be flexible. Farmers, they're working on nature's time, and believe it or not, farming is a year-round job. And even if we're talking fresh fruits and vegetables, it is a year-round job. There's seed orders and plots and numerous other things to take care of during the off season. So it's important that you understand that, and that you can't just show up to their farm, season or off season, and expect them to give you an hour of their time. Not that any of you would do that, but it's just important to understand that, and also important to understand that when you're trying to schedule meetings with them. And then hold grower meetings. That was one of the things that worked really well for me, was just allowing growers to come in, voice their concerns related to food safety practices, and it hopefully will allow you to alleviate, to alleviate some of their concerns, and kind of show them that, hey, I'm not here as we're not here to control everything. This is more about, just being proactive with a few things, and it's not going to be nearly as bad as you think. And once we had a couple of those meetings while I was in Virginia, things seemed to go much smoother from there. So I think that was definitely an effective method. And then I think this is very important as well. Explain the potential negative impact of an outbreak. And I'm not saying, be a fear monger or anything like that. I don't think that is necessary. I think we all understand that if a foodborne illness from a small family farm, that could have a large impact, negative impact on the whole local food movement and direct markets, small farmers, small businesses in general. And I don't think anyone wants that to happen to them or their community or anyone in that type of business across the country. So it's important to be proactive with that and avoid any outbreaks. And work on the farm. I understand that this is going out there a little bit. I'm certainly aware of that. But if you do have time, this kind of goes back to the developing relationships too. Or dedicate a day or even a half a day to work with your fresh produce suppliers. One, this will kind of get you'll, if you want to know how they work things out on farm, this is a great way, and also it's a great way to establish a relationship and kind of converse with them about some of their concerns. So you can take care of a lot of issues just by going to spend it doesn't have to be a whole day. Just spend 3 or 4 hours, see if they'll let you weed with them. And weeding is a very meditative activity, so I'd highly recommend that. Okay, and then utilize volunteers. Seek out area nonprofits or organizations in your area, or if you're near a college or university, solicit upper-level undergraduate students or graduate students that are preferably in that field to kind of help you with organizing and getting your ducks in a row. There's numerous things that are involved with this process, and if you can have help and organization, then that makes things much easier. Patronize their market booths. Periodically stop by and try some of their stuff, and as well as other vendors. I'm not saying pick favorites, but, I think Wendell Berry said eating is an agricultural act. So tasting a product is an important component of agriculture. So it's, once again, another way to establish a relationship with someone, a grower in your community. And I think these are, no, this is the last one in that section. And then know your region's GAP certifiers. Become acquainted with who certifies fresh produce growers in your area, and then be able to provide growers with that information should they decide to follow up on that. So what might happen is someone may not seem very interested in becoming GAP certified, but I would encourage you to leave them with that information, and you never know, that might be something they follow up on, 2 or 3 weeks from then. It might just be, they might read something in the news or something might cross their mind, and they might say, yeah, that might be something I should explore. So leave them with that information. Be able to provide that with them. I mean, these are a few tips for getting involved beyond the farmer's market. These are certainly optional. Everything, of course, is optional, but these are some things that worked for me as far as going beyond just your own community, and they proved to be helpful at a local, regional, and state level. Working with your state's cooperative extension. So Betsy, Betsy's with cooperative extension, and the cooperative extension that I worked with in Virginia were wonderful. There were a couple of extension agents in the area and also extension specialists that I worked with that were just wonderful. And so at the moment, with GAP certification not being a requirement, one of the things that we had started working on in Virginia prior to my departure was developing a scale-appropriate model food safety plan for small to mid-scale family farms, and that is an extra step, but it did prove to be very effective, and hopefully it will only continue to strengthen the local food system in Virginia. Work with your state's Food Policy and Food Systems Council. That was I was on a projects committee on the Virginia Food Systems Council, and one of our projects. We picked 3 projects to implement over the next 2 years, and one of them was to basically dedicate a lot of attention to a project that would prioritize a scale-appropriate food safety standard. It would at the moment, with GAPS not being a requirement, this would be basically a mirror program of GAPS. And on that note, I do want to talk a brief bit about mirror programs. And mirror programs are essentially scale-appropriate models that reflect all the important points that Betsy addressed all of those. And a mirror program, it has to address those, but there are certain things, if you notice, if you get into the nitty-gritty of the GAPS, that it seems kind of irrelevant to a smaller farm. And that's where a mirror program comes in. Appalachian Sustainable Development in Abingdon, Virginia, has developed a program like that, and I would encourage you to seek out nonprofits in your area that work with the food system that may have done something along those lines. Let's see. Become familiar with the organizations working on food safety, and maybe subscribe to their newsletter, or if they have a listservs. The Farmers Market Coalition that Stacy is the executive director of, they do great stuff on food safety. They are working on it, and that would probably be most pertinent to the people attending this webinar. The National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition, I've been very impressed with what they've put out, as well as the Center for Rural Affairs, Northeast Organic Farming Association, Community Alliance with Family Farms, Wild Farm Alliance, and the Food and Water Watch. They've all these organizations have done their homework and can provide you with some feedback on the legislation going around in Washington, D.C. right now on food safety. And then follow H.R. 2749 and S510. S510 is the Senate's version of H.R. 2749, which is the piece of legislation on food safety that's going on in Washington, D.C. right now. And these are just a couple of websites that I found to be useful that have allowed me to track the legislation and keep up with what's going on. Again, Congress won't reconvene until September the 7th. So that's, if this does interest you, I would encourage you to get involved and familiarize yourself with this legislation and contact your senators if it is a concern to you. I think that is all. That is it. And I would just, I had a lot of help on these tips, and I worked with some great growers in Floyd County, Virginia, and worked with Anthony Flacavento at Appalachian Sustainable Development and Robin Robbins at Appalachian Harvest, and they were great to work with along the way. So I have to credit them with a lot of these ideas and a lot of the collaboration here. So I guess we'll open it back up for questions and see what everyone has.
There have been some good information in that that's been posted to the chat box. So I don't know if you've been watching it, but you can feel free to scroll up some information of where to get more information, some papers. So feel free to use that as a resource too. Okay. So here's one from Nate. And that I would say this is probably for Betsy. I don't know if Betsy's answered this yet or not, but it says, are there any statistics that compare outbreaks and illness in organic and conventional produce?
Okay, I actually was in the middle of typing this response, but I'll just go ahead and say it. Okay. I believe there are some publications, scientific publications, that compare contamination rates, like when they do a vast survey and they look for contamination rates. I do not believe there are any publications that compare illnesses, because what happens with the illnesses is when there is a foodborne related outbreak, they'll try and do trace back to it. And so they'll try and find where it originated from. And I don't know if anybody's gone through and said, oh, this was an organic versus this was a conventional. I know there was some discussion in the 06 outbreak because I believe that farm was transitioning to organic. Don't take my word on that. That's just what's in my head. But I know there's some publications, I believe they're out of Minnesota, where they've looked at contamination rates, just broad spectrum type contamination rates on fresh produce.
Thank you, Betsy. Do we have any more questions? feel free to type them in, and we can pass them on to the appropriate speaker. And we'd also want to encourage you all to download the files out of the file share boxes to the right of the Safety First screen.
Like a couple of people are typing. Well,
Okay, so here's one. How might national adoption of the California Leafy Greens Marketing Agreement affect farmers market producers?
You want me to try this one?
Yeah, you can go ahead and hit that one, Betsy.
It all depends on what the marketing agreement looks like. So, some marketing agreements are voluntary sign-up, so you don't necessarily have to be in the marketing agreement. But if you agree to sign up to the agreement, then you have to mandatorily follow the agreement. Okay, so that if it's one of the ones that it's not mandatory, but it's voluntary sign-up, mandatory following the rules once you sign up, then it'll be up to individual growers' decision. In the case of farm markets, the farm market could say, you're not allowed to sell produce at our farm market unless you're part of the leafy greens market. Automatically mandatory for everybody that produces leafy greens. The person who would know the answer to that question is Kathy Staley at the USDA.
I have a question from Nate. Anyone have experience with lactic acid as an organically approved sanitizer? Betsy, are you aware of anything going on with lactic acid as a sanitizer?
There may be stuff out there. I do not know what it is.
I'm
so
unaware
that's
of
just
that.
my ignorance.
Yeah, I was just working on an organic farm, and we did not work with any lactic acid as a sanitizer. Did you work with anything along those lines, Brigitte?
Nope. Vinegar. We have some organic farmers that use vinegar.
That's me type.
Jeff, I want to point out at the bottom of the screen you'll see a few URLs. The Farmers Market Coalition has a great, huge set of resources for markets, market managers, producers, and the link there, you'll have to copy it and paste it into your browser, but that'll take you directly to all of the documents in the Farmers Market Coalition resources on food safety. A couple people have been saying that they're having difficulty getting the files out of the file sharer. So that's another place that you can visit. So these files should be available recording as well. You should be able to download. How does one register for the online GAP training sessions offered by Cornell?
That's a great question. If you email me, I will email you when the registration opens. What we do is we open registration before each class. I can tell you it's that. Let me grab my calendar here. There's one on September 2nd and one on September 30th. And the registration should be opening here in a few days. And if you just drop me an email, I will make sure you get emailed when it opens.
Do you want to say what your email is here?
Oh, thank you. That would be helpful. My email is E as in elephant, A as in apple, B as in boy. Why don't I
you can type it into that chat box and make sure it goes to everyone.
Right. I'm not sure how to not type in that chat box without answering somebody's question.
Oh, use the smaller chat box up above. Connect it to everyone. Here.
Oh, there it is. I'm sorry.
That's
okay.
No problem. If anyone has any other questions, speak now. Otherwise, we'll close out.
Okay, it's from Beth. Are these trainings open to anyone in any state, Betsy?
The online trainings, yes, most definitely. Right now, we haven't been letting in international people because it's a USDA project, and our advisory group wanted to keep it domestic because of the funding. Which is a problem that we're dealing with, but I just want to be clear about that. I don't know if there's anybody from a foreign webinar. All the other trainings, for instance, there's going to be a training that's going on in Illinois in November, and I know he's trying to get that advertised in Michigan and Indiana. So if the trainings are up on our upcoming events, they're open to people.
Well, I want to thank you all. Thank the presenters and the moderator. You guys did a great job, and I want to thank everyone for attending today's webinar on food safety. In a few days, the recording will be available on the Farmers Market Coalition website. So if there's anyone you think should have been here today, you can let them know about the recording of the webinar. And I'll get that URL up in a second. Also, don't forget to register for the next and final webinar in the Information Marketplace series. This one is on electronic benefits transfer for the supplementary nutrition assistance programs at markets. You'll hear about how to set up a program, how to promote it, and all sorts of practical advice. Let me also, I want to let you know that there's going to be a short survey that will come up in your browser right after this webinar about the webinar. If you could just take a few minutes to answer the questions, it really helps us to improve our service to you. So again, thank you very much, and have a great day. Bye.